The sprawling glass conference table at my parents' Manhattan penthouse reflected the city skyline through floor-to-ceiling windows, but I barely noticed the spectacular view. Instead, I was hunched over my iPad sketching character designs for what would eventually become a globally streamed animated series. My stylus moved in smooth strokes across the screen, bringing to life the fantasy world that had been living in my imagination for months. "Alexandra, put that tablet away," my father commanded from his position at the head of the table, where he was reviewing quarterly reports from his hedge fund. "We're having a family meeting about your future, not art class." My mother nodded sharply, her perfectly styled silver hair catching the afternoon light as she gestured dismissively at my work. "Art doesn't pay bills, sweetheart. You're 28 years old, living in that tiny Brooklyn apartment, spending all day drawing cartoons like you're still in high school." "They're not cartoons," I said quietly, not looking up from my screen. "They're character concepts for a serialized narrative project." My older sister Rachel laughed from her position across the table, where she'd been showing off photos from her latest medical conference. As a successful neurosurgeon, she'd never understood my creative pursuits. "Serialized narrative project? Alex, just call it what it is. You're drawing pictures and making up stories. That's what 5-year-olds do for fun." "At least it keeps her occupied," my younger brother Marcus added with a condescending chuckle. As a Wall Street investment banker who'd just closed a $200 million merger, he felt qualified to comment on everyone else's life choices. Better than those phases where she wanted to be an actress or a musician or whatever other artistic delusions struck her fancy. The familiar sting of their collective dismissal settled over me like a heavy blanket. This intervention had been building for weeks. Their growing concern about my lack of direction, their increasingly pointed suggestions that I consider practical career options, their barely concealed embarrassment when colleagues asked what their youngest daughter did for work. "Alexandra," Dad continued, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used with underperforming portfolio managers, "your mother and I have been patient with these artistic hobbies, but it's time to face reality. Rachel has established a world-renowned surgical practice, Marcus just made partner at Goldman Sachs, and you're, what? Selling sketches at weekend markets." "I don't sell sketches at markets," I replied, adding shading to a dragon's wing with precise, practiced strokes. "I haven't sold anything at markets in over 3 years." "That's even worse," Mom exclaimed, her voice rising with maternal frustration. "At least that was some kind of income, however minimal. What are you living on now? Credit cards? Our guilt money?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke from Dad's expensive cigars. I could feel their collective gaze boring into me, waiting for the admission they'd been expecting, that I was indeed surviving on family handouts, that my artistic dreams had led nowhere, that I was ready to accept their generous offers to help me find real work in their respective industries. "Get a real job, not art," Mom declared with finality. "Rachel could get you an administrative position at the hospital. Marcus knows people in financial services who need assistance. Even your father could arrange something entry-level at the fund. But this drawing obsession has to stop." I might have responded, might have tried once again to explain that my work was more complex than they imagined, more valuable than they assumed, but my phone buzzed against the glass table with an incoming call that made my pulse quicken. The caller ID displayed, "Netflix board urgent," but my family had no way of recognizing the significance. "Excuse me," I said softly, sliding to answer. "Hello. Alexandra, thank God we reached you." The voice belonged to Ted Sarandos, though my family would never recognize Netflix's chief content officer. "The board meeting just concluded. We need your immediate approval for the $890 million content acquisition package. The entire streaming empire expansion depends on your authorization." The conference room had gone completely silent, my family's intervention grinding to a halt as they processed the words, streaming empire, and $890 million. "Which specific acquisitions?" I asked, maintaining my calm tone while continuing to sketch dragon scales with my stylus. "The European animation studios or the Asian content partnerships?" "Both. Plus the Latin American production facilities and the African distribution networks. Your content strategy division mapped out the entire global expansion, and we need your signature before the Tokyo markets open." His voice carried the urgency of someone managing billion-dollar time-sensitive deals. "Alexandra, This acquisition makes your streaming content empire the largest independent producer in the world. Dad's quarterly reports lay forgotten on the glass table. Rachel's medical conference photos scattered across her lap as her hands went limp. Marcus had frozen mid-scroll through his banking apps. And the integration timeline for the animation division? I continued as if discussing weekend dinner plans rather than reshaping global entertainment. 18 months for full operational merger. Your existing portfolio, the animation studios, the documentary production companies, the international streaming platforms, everything flows together seamlessly. The board estimates this brings your total content control to approximately 73% of all globally streamed entertainment. I allowed myself the smallest smile, one that I made sure reached every corner of the now silent penthouse. Approved, I said clearly, ensuring each word carried to my family's stunned faces. Authorize all acquisitions and proceed with the expansion. Brilliant. Oh, and Alexandra. Congratulations on officially becoming the youngest person ever to control a streaming content empire worth $4.7 billion. Those cartoon drawings are projected to generate $1.2 billion in revenue this quarter alone. I ended the call and placed my phone gently beside my iPad, where my dragon character gazed up at us with newly completed golden eyes. The silence stretched like a held breath, broken only by the distant sound of Manhattan traffic 40 floors below. That was Ted Sarandos from Netflix, I said conversationally, returning to my sketch. Apparently, the board approved my $890 million global content acquisition. It officially makes my streaming empire the largest independent entertainment producer worldwide. Mom's wine glass slipped from her nerveless fingers, the crystal shattering against the marble floor with a sound like breaking assumptions. Your streaming empire? Rachel whispered, her medical expertise apparently failing her in the face of entertainment industry realities. Content creation and distribution primarily. I own 47% of Netflix, along with controlling interests in Amazon Prime's content division, Apple TV's original programming, and most of the major international streaming platforms. I added texture to the dragon's scales with careful precision. Those cartoon drawings Dad mentioned? Last quarter they generated approximately $300 million in global licensing revenue. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the conference table as my family processed this information with varying degrees of shock and disbelief. But you live in that tiny Brooklyn apartment, Marcus managed weakly. You take the subway. Tax efficiency and creative inspiration, I explained patiently. Also, the Brooklyn location is actually a converted warehouse space that houses my main animation studios, digital content labs, and the headquarters for Constellation Entertainment Holdings. The subway gives me time to sketch without interruptions. Dad was staring at his hedge fund reports as if they'd suddenly become worthless pieces of paper. Constellation Entertainment Holdings. That's the company behind most of the content you stream daily, yes. I smiled, continuing to work on my character design. The fantasy series based on this dragon? Netflix paid $67 million for exclusive global rights before I even finished the pilot episode. The room felt smaller now, the spectacular Manhattan skyline seeming less impressive against the backdrop of a $4.7 billion entertainment empire. My successful family looked like visitors in their own space, uncertain and displaced by revelations that redefined everything they thought they knew about success and failure. This has to be some kind of mistake, Rachel said, her voice rising with panic that seemed inappropriate for a renowned neurosurgeon. Alex, you can't just own Netflix. That's not how the world works. You draw pictures and write stories. I create intellectual property that gets developed into globally distributed entertainment content, I corrected mildly. The pictures and stories you dismissed as childish hobbies? They're the foundation of a media empire that reaches approximately 230 million subscribers worldwide. Marcus was pacing now, his expensive investment banker shoes clicking against the marble in an increasingly frantic rhythm. Wait. If you own 47% of Netflix, then you... His financial expertise was finally catching up with the implications. You're on the board of directors. You make content decisions for the entire platform. I chair the content acquisition committee actually. And yes, I approve which shows get produced, which movies get funded, which international content gets distributed globally. I captured his expression perfectly in a quick sketch. The moment when someone realizes they've been completely wrong about everything they thought they knew. Mom had gone completely pale, her social coordinator composure finally cracking. Alexandra, honey, if this is true, if you really own all these companies, why didn't you tell us? Why let us think you were wasting your life on art? The question hung in the air like expensive perfume, heavy and unavoidable. I looked up from my iPad for the first time since the call, meeting each of their stunned gazes in turn. Tell you what exactly? I asked quietly. That every time I tried to share something I was excited about, you called it drawing cartoons? That when I mentioned working with major studios, you assumed I meant applying for receptionist jobs? That when I talked about my production meetings, you suggested I consider data entry positions? But Alexandra, Dad interjected, his hedge fund instincts finally kicking in, surely you could have been more explicit about the scope of your success. Like when? I challenged. Like last year when I mentioned the Disney partnership and Rachel told me to stop fantasizing about working for real companies? Or 6 months ago when I talked about my Netflix meetings, and you all assumed I meant job interviews for their customer service department. Marcus stopped pacing, his face flushing red with embarrassment. You're telling me that when you said you were working on animated projects, you meant you were producing content for Netflix? I meant exactly what I said. You're the ones who decided it meant something smaller. I returned to my sketch, adding intricate details to the dragon's expression. The same way you decided my storytelling projects were fantasy delusions instead of billion-dollar intellectual property development. Rachel's medical conference materials finally scattered completely as her hands shook. This is insane. Alex, you're talking about billions of dollars. Billions. People don't just accidentally build media empires while their families aren't paying attention. They do when their families are too busy being disappointed to actually listen, I replied, capturing the moment of her realization in a quick character study. You know what's particularly ironic? I actually tried to include you. 2 years ago when Netflix first acquired my animation studio, I invited you all to the celebration premiere. Remember what you said? The memory hit Mom visibly, her hand flying to cover her mouth. Oh God. We said we were busy with important work. Dad had a crucial client presentation. Rachel had life-saving surgery to perform. Marcus was closing deals that actually mattered. Each word landed like a physical blow. So I celebrated alone. Just me and the entire Netflix executive team and about 200 million global viewers who watched the premiere. No big deal. The penthouse felt suffocating now, the afternoon light casting harsh shadows across the expensive furniture. My family looked like strangers in their own space, uncertain and diminished by revelations that redefined their understanding of success and value. Alexandra, we didn't know, Dad said weakly, his hedge fund confidence evaporating. If you had just explained. Explained what? That my cartoon drawings were generating more revenue than your hedge fund's best quarter? That my storytelling hobby reaches more people daily than Rachel's entire medical career will touch in a lifetime. I checked my custom Apple Watch, a prototype given to content partners worth over $100 million annually. I tried explaining. You weren't interested in hearing it. Derek's voice came out small and strained. That watch. That's not available to consumers, is it? Limited prototype. Apple gives them exclusively to their top-tier content partners. I smiled, the expression not particularly warm. They wanted early feedback before launching their streaming service integration. My content empire generates about $200 million annually in Apple TV exclusives. $200 million? Marcus whispered, his investment banking salary suddenly seeming modest. Just the Apple partnership. Amazon pays approximately $340 million annually for Prime content exclusives. Netflix provides $580 million for platform priority, and the international streaming platforms contribute another $400 million combined. I moved toward the windows, where the Manhattan skyline provided perfect inspiration for my next urban fantasy project. Those partnerships require ownership of content creation facilities, which is why I acquired them systematically over the past 5 years. Mom was crying now, tears streaming down her perfectly made-up cheeks. Alexandra, I'm so sorry. We were trying to help. We were worried about your future. My future is fine, I said gently, turning back to capture her genuine emotion in a character expression study. Constellation Entertainment Holdings is projected to reach $6 billion in valuation within 12 months. We're expanding into virtual reality content, interactive streaming experiences, and AI-generated personalized entertainment. The city noises grew louder. Horns, sirens, silence at the table. $6 billion, Rachel whispered. My company is worth $6 billion, I corrected. The art is just the start. The empire is global. I packed my iPad. Tokyo team needs anime approval. London wants expansion talks. You have offices abroad? Mom asked weakly. Tokyo, London, Berlin, Sao Paulo, Mumbai, Lagos. Content is global. The elevator opened. My assistant waited. Seoul needs approval for a $120 million drama budget. Disney wants to discuss Marvel. I nodded, then faced my stunned family. You know the saddest part? I wanted to share this with you. But you always said, art doesn't pay bills. The doors closed on their silence. On the way down, my assistant briefed me. Netflix meeting, $890 million acquisition, animation directors waiting. The girl told to get a real job, now ran a streaming empire. My phone buzzed. Dad's text. We had no idea. Please come back. I smiled, set it to silent. Manhattan traffic seemed lighter as we drove to my studios, where imagination was turned into the world's most valuable currency.